first 21 days of the year in January, you give over to God in a fast. And if you don't like fasting, well, join the club. Nobody really likes it. But it's very, very important in our lives, in our lifestyle of walking as Christians, to deny ourselves, to be able to deny ourselves. And fasting is one of those things where literally you begin the process of your body dying by not consuming food, right? It's going to take a while for that to happen, but that's literally what starts to happen. And our flesh weakens. And when our flesh weakens, our spirit gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And we really dedicate that towards God because of what it does. Fasting can be very difficult for people, and it can very quickly turn into religious type activities. And that's not the purpose of the goal or the intention of what we're doing here. So we just encourage as a body that we all join together and fast the first 21 days, dedicate to God the first 21 days of the year. 21 is only the number because of the prayers that Daniel gave up. It took 21 days for the answer to come back. So again, it's just a significance thing. There's no magic formula that we found in the Bible that all your prayers will be answered because you do this. But it is going to make an impact. I've been doing it for years and years and years, and I have seen such a difference in my life, in the ministry, all kinds of different things because of the fasting. I remember the first year I did it after we started the church, and we had done it several times before that, just as a family. I thought I would do it in January to dedicate to God the first 21 days, and then he asked me to do it again. And then he asked me to do it again. So in 1 year, I think I fasted 21 days, either 3 or 4 times, and that was a tough year. But after that year, I saw how much spiritual ground that helped me take because of what I was about to step into in ministry. And so anyways, I just wanted to make a quick announcement about that. We would be happy for everyone to join in. If you did join us, great. I hope it's going well. Be strong. You know, it's like clockwork. If you start fasting, somebody's going to bring some food to your work. Somebody's going to offer you something that they've never offered you before that is the tastiest thing you've ever seen in your life. Like, it just happens like clockwork. I remember every time I would fast, food would arrive at work. And I remember the first time it happened, I was young at the time. I didn't have a good paying job, and we never got free food. And all of a sudden, there was like, this person had this catering, and they had tons of food left over. And then somebody decided to buy donuts for the whole department. I mean, it was just like 3 or 4 things happened in one day. It was the first day I was fasting. And I'm like, wow, talk about temptation. Especially the donuts. Anyways. So this morning, I want to talk about our expectations being shattered. Today's message is really kind of critical, and honestly, this is one of those ones where I really am not, I don't care if you guys are interested or not, because I'm preaching to myself this morning, and I really, really think this is an important word, and God's really been speaking to me a lot the last couple of days. But it was interesting, you know, as 2025 began to end, you know, those last couple days of 2025, and then we entered into the first few days of 2026, I couldn't help but start to notice the inevitable words coming from all the prophets, right? And it typically is the same thing every new year, where they start talking about this new thing that God's going to do this year, right? Or this fresh outpouring, or this new revelation. And I don't mean to make light of that as if that's not true or that I don't agree with any of that. But because I do believe that God is always doing something new, and he is always moving forward, and he is always pushing us to that place where we can obtain that new revelation. And so I believe all of that stuff. I just thought it was kind of funny because it happens every new year where it's almost the same word being given out every single time. And I think it's good to be encouraged at the beginning of the new year about what God will be doing. And really, when you read his word, that should encourage you of what he's going to be doing in our lives, because he always comes through, and he always makes it work. He always makes a way for those who follow him, who love him, like all those different things. And so it's good to be encouraged. But for some reason this year, when I started hearing those words, something struck me in my core. And I don't mean like my core, like my ab workout core. I mean like the core of who I am. You know, have you ever had those moments where you're just minding your own business in life, and then something just kind of hits you in your spirit, in your soul, something like deep within you, and maybe not necessarily shaken, but it just gets your attention. Well, that's what happened to me. When I started hearing these words and stuff for the new year, something just kind of struck me inside. And in my typical fashion, of course, I just started joking around with Lindsay, and I told her I was going to give a word for 2026 this morning that had nothing to do with some new outpouring or something. You know, it was a joke. I was like, yeah, I'm going to go up there and I'm just going to be telling everybody the word for 2026 is you're going to learn how to wait for God. And when you think you've learned it all, you're going to wait a little more, right? Like, it's not what people normally say in the body of Christ for the new year, right? It's usually encouraging. It's usually like something that you've never seen before is going to happen this year, and so I just thought that was funny. I was joking around about that. But then last night, God started to deal with me about 2026, and I didn't expect Him to give me a word for 2026. I don't operate in the office of prophecy, but anybody can prophesy. Y'all realize that, right? So you don't have to be a prophet. You don't have to have a business card that says prophet under your name to be able to prophesy to the body of Christ. So He started giving me this word for 2026, and it was just really heavy with me because it connected with that thing inside me that was struck that I couldn't quite put into words. As this new year started, and you know, I was shaking inside. I'm like, okay, God, what is this? And He started to reveal to me what exactly He will be doing in 2026. And I don't know if it's something that I was expecting, but that's the whole point is sometimes He does things that we're not expecting. Sometimes He shows up in ways and in times that we never thought would happen. So He reminded me that more than one thing can be true in His kingdom at once, right? He can still do a new thing in 2026. He can still give you that new revelation, that new fresh outpouring. And He can also shatter your expectations, right? He can do more than one thing at the same time, and He's pretty good at it, to be honest with you. So what started out as a bit of a joke with me, kind of just jaw-jacking in the car with my wife, it quickly turned into the word that God had for 2026 for this congregation. We may be small, but we are mighty in this church. I really believe that. And so I think that whoever grabs hold of what I'm about to talk about today is going to see transformation, is going to see the supernatural start to be unlocked. And I don't mean that in a way like, if you subscribe now, you will get the transformation you've been looking. I'm not talking about that. Like, there's a lot of words that I've heard over the years, and I do believe in the power. Again, I'm not trying to make light of this. I do believe in the power that God will bring forth through a word that a Christian grabs hold of and just starts moving forward with. And today, this is one of those words. So I hope it speaks to somebody in here. And if it doesn't, it's okay, because it's going to speak to me, like I said. This is so important to me. I'm actually going to be printing a condensed version of this word, and I'm going to be putting it in my prophecy binder. I have a little binder that I keep by my bedside of all the prophecies that I've ever been given over my life. And anytime I need to hear from God, I go read that. Because sometimes they'll take a while to come to pass. Sometimes the Word of God doesn't always show up when we expect it to. And this is so strong to me that I believe that that's one of those things that I need to put in there. And I need to read again and again and again and really let it soak in and permeate. So, to set the stage for what I'm going to be talking about, I will be starting with a story that most of you guys probably know. But I'm just going to be focusing in on a couple of points about this story. I'm not really going to give a Bible lesson about it. Every one of us carries some sort of expectation in our life. It kind of starts young. When we're kids, you know, we want to grow up and be whatever. We dream of this, we dream of that, and it's different for every person. There's a lot of expectations that we kind of come into life with and grow through. sometimes when you hit adulthood, those get shattered in just that transition of becoming an adult and realizing the reality of life, that, you know, you're not always going to be a princess on a happily ever after story or whatever, but career paths, family plans, stability, comfort, you know, all these different things that we have expectations for. We build up in our mind things that we want to be able to do in our life, and this is good. These are these expectations that help us to continue to push forward in life. If you didn't have any expectations in your life, you'd kind of just be there, breathing air, and that would be a sad life. But these expectations are good, right? But there are moments when God will interrupt our expectations. And sometimes when he does that, he'll do it with something we never thought would be the case, right? Like something that we did not expect. He'll throw us a curveball sometimes in our life, and it's like, wow, I never saw that coming. I never expected that for my life. I don't know what this is going to mean for each of you, but that really is the word for 2026. That he's going to be shattering some expectations that you've built up in your heart, but for the good. I don't want you to take this as like a negative message. Like he's going to shatter them for the good. So for 2026, we need to expect the unexpected, because the Lord is going to do that. He's going to shatter some things that we have built up in our hearts. God always works things out for the good of those who love him. How many people know that? I know that. And I don't just know it because Paul said it. I know it because I've seen it over and over and over again in my life. I have been following God since I was a kid, and time again, I see him show up. And it's not always when I think he should show up. It's not always how I think he should show up. But he always is faithful to show up and to work everything out for the good of those who love him. So what better place to start when talking about shattering expectations than with the story of a woman of God named Esther? If you haven't read the book of Esther, I highly encourage you to do so. Esther really never expected to be a queen. That's going to be my guess. She didn't probably start her life thinking she would be a queen over a pagan country. I'm sure of it, that didn't enter her mind when she was young. She probably never dreamed as a little girl that she would stand before a king and risk her life. Pretty sure that wasn't part of her playtime. I'm sure she never expected that the fate of God's people would rest on her having courage. But it was God's unexpected call over Esther's life that became the critical point in the story. The call itself over her life changed history. She really didn't have any royal pedigree, right? Like she didn't come from a royal family. This wasn't like a appointed marriage or anything like that. She likely expected to live a quiet, peaceful life in Persia, living faithfully among the exiles that she was there with. And she was taken into the king's harem. This was not like a voluntary beauty pageant, right? This was something totally different in the story. Again, if you haven't read the story, I encourage you to read it. This was more of a king flexing their power, a political sweep, so to speak, where these women were collected to be put before the king. And I'm almost positive that the young Jewish women of the day did not dream of marrying a pagan king. Probably not part of their lifelong dreams. But then something remarkable actually happened. Esther was chosen. That's crazy. When you really stop and think about the circumstances, the context of what was going on in that story, and the fact that she was chosen, it's pretty remarkable to me that would happen. And you could look at it simply as fate, that, that was the fate of Esther's life, and that's what was going to happen. But I really believe that the truth is that the king did not choose her, but rather God appointed her in that day for that to be part of her life. She didn't expect any of that, but yet there she was. She found herself in a position where everything in her life got turned upside down, where she's having to go through something that she never thought about before. You know, it's great when we have to do something, when we have a little bit of time to prep for it, kind of get our head in the right place, get our thoughts organized, and then go after it, right? But sometimes it's better when something gets flipped over and we don't have time to think. We don't have time to get in our own way. So I truly believe that God appointed her as opposed to the king choosing her. And her being in this position would kind of like be getting a job that you didn't apply for. You know, like, oh, by the way, you're going to be in charge of this, this, and this. Like, whoa, I didn't sign up for all that. What are we talking about? That'd be a little stressful. A little stressful. And not to mention marrying a king, right? Like, this is a whole nother, like, pressure she probably felt was probably incredible. So, after this, the story in Esther becomes very clear as to why God would appoint her in such a position. Not that the king chose her, but that God appointed her. Her role was to help stop the genocide of God's people. It's very clear. God put her in place to stop that from happening. Again, probably not what she dreamed about as a little girl. And there are several inferences when you really read between the lines of what is being said within the scriptures, and it keeps pointing back to the fact that God appointed her to be in that position for that time, for that day, for that circumstance of the people of God, the children of Israel, were going to face genocide. And she was appointed to be the woman that stopped that, to be the courageous person that answered the call that God had on her life, that she had no expectations for. Mordecai himself was convinced that even if she had remained silent, relief would come for the people of God. But he wasn't so sure that his family would survive, including Esther. So he had faith in God, that at some point God's going to come through, and he's going to prevent this whole genocide thing from happening. But we may not survive. Right? So he had faith. But then he states something incredible. As he's talking to Esther, he says, "Yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom of Persia, as the now queen, for such a time as this." Everybody loves quoting that. For such a time as this. It sounds so beautiful. That's why I love reading out of the New King James Version. It's very eloquent. It's almost poetic. For such a time as this. It really encourages us. We grab hold of those words, and it hits us hard in the heart. But we don't always connect to what was happening when that was said. Esther was in a moment in her life when she had no expectations of doing what she was called to do. That's heavy for such a time as this. So, it really rings true that God appointed her in a position and she had an opportunity. She had an opportunity to step up to the plate, to what God was going to do in her life. Esther then had to risk her life by approaching the king uninvited because of what was going on. There were a lot of things that were going on behind the scenes in the story. And she had to approach the king uninvited, which in those days could get you killed. If you went to the king uninvited, even as the queen, you could get killed for it. And she knew that. So she's now risking her life. So first she goes from, okay, now I'm going to be in some dude's house that I don't know who he is, and oh, by the way, I'm going to be queen of these pagan people, and, you know, like, I mean, talk about a roller coaster. And then these things are unfolding in the story where she finds out her people are about to be, you know, subject to mass murder, and now she has to put herself on the line to try to save these people. She probably expected a life of comfort, which was ultimately replaced with a life of courage. I guarantee you she did not go into this thinking that that's what she would be living. The rest of the story of Esther shows God's power on display through the courage of one woman. And that is so powerful. Her courage was where God's power was displayed. By her saying yes to the call that God put on her life that she had no expectations for. She had to show courage, she had to show obedience, right? And her appointment into that palace was the reason why the people of God survived. So she didn't really have a lot of time to think about this, right? Like I talked about. Her expectations were probably shattered very quickly. And she probably didn't get to sulk in it like, man, this sucks, you know, like, I don't want to do this, I don't want to be here. Like, things probably started to happen really fast where she was going to have to respond. She was going to have to step up to the plate. And that's exactly what she did. She stepped up to what God had appointed her to do, and she showed boldness in a time of great danger. We don't always get to choose what God has appointed us to do. And that can be a very difficult thing for us to accept. Sometimes things happen in our life that we're not expecting. And it's not always the bad stuff, right? Sometimes things will happen through our walk with God, where we're sitting back and we're kind of like, hey, you know, God, hello, anybody home? Like, are you planning? Are you just like randomly throwing stuff in my life? Like, what are you doing up there? Like, I don't know about y'all, but sometimes I've been in moments in my life where I really don't understand what the Lord is doing. And it can be confusing. But sometimes those are the best moments for us to press in and to really cling to the Holy Spirit. Because if you're operating in a way where you don't always see the end and you're confused as to what's happening, sometimes the power of God is starting to build, and momentum spiritually is building. And the point is we have to remain faithful to that. We have to get away from looking at our expectations. We have to get away from thinking about what we thought would happen and simply just answer the call that God has put in our life, even if that means to just simply stand and be faithful and to wait on Him, or whatever the case may be. And we always have the choice on whether or not we're going to give God our yes. But sometimes God's going to shatter your expectations and take you in a direction that you never imagined. And I believe, like I said, that this is the word for 2026. Just based on how the Lord has been speaking this to me. Again, I do not take the office of prophet, but I am prophesying over anyone who wants to hear it. That God is going to shatter some expectations this year, but there's going to be some things that come out of that are going to bless your life. That you're going to look back on and you're going to say, wow, I never expected that to happen, but I'm so happy and so glad that I gave God my yes. Sometimes God's greatest assignments in our lives arrive disguised as inconvenience, discomfort, crisis. I love when He does that. It can be hard, right? When you're in the middle of a crisis, you're not stopping and thinking, oh, boy, I can't wait to see what God does out of this, right? Like, we struggle through some of these things, but that can be God's appointment arriving in your life and showing itself to you. And it doesn't have to be a crisis, right? It can just be things that you didn't think about coming and they're inconvenient or whatever, right? And nothing about Esther's story was accidental. And nothing about your expectations being shattered will be accidental either. God's going to show up and He's going to do some things and He's going to speak some things and some things are going to be moved around and it's not going to be on accident. It's going to be exactly according to His purposes for your life. Esther had to surrender to the plan that God revealed to her. I'm sure that wasn't easy, but it was through this surrender that the significant was revealed. And it's really no different than the stories of Mary or Paul. When you look at their lives, right, their expectations were greatly shattered. And they had to surrender to the call that God had on their life in order for the significant things that came out of their lives to happen. They didn't see what was going to happen beforehand. They didn't know the story beforehand. But they got thrust into a moment of discomfort, crisis, inconvenience, whatever, and they had to surrender to that. They had to know and trust that God had them in the palm of his hand. And all they had to do was show faith and courage and boldness and just keep going. Just keep going. Even though this is not how I expected things to go for my life, I got to keep going. So this is kind of a common theme with God. You get to know God as a person the more you read his word, the more you spend time with him, the more you press in prayer. He will start to reveal himself as a person. And when we get to know people, we start to get to know their tendencies. We start to get to know what things about them are beautiful. We get to know what they like, right? All these things as we learn someone and get comfortable with someone. And the same exact process happens with God. As we walk with him, as we get to know him, we get to know him as a person. And this is very common for him to do, where he will shatter expectations. And really it's more for us than it is for him. Think about how well that speech was that you went over in your head when you had the time before your dad came home to get you in trouble. Oh, I'm going to tell your dad, right? And when we sat up in our room terrified and we're like, okay, this is what I'm going to say. Okay, Dad, listen, we need to talk. No, put the belt down. We need to talk. We need to work this out, right? Like, we go through this thing where we build this rehearsed speech or whatever, and sometimes it's better when we don't do that. Sometimes it's better when God just shows up and shatters things, and we just have to react, because then our true selves are going to come out. Now, that's one thing that I have had to learn in the occupations that I've had. Being in the infantry, in the army, being a law enforcement officer, we train. And just when you think you've had enough training, you're going to train some more. I have hundreds of hours of training every year. I'm only required a low number, but we train like crazy. Same thing in the military. When I was deployed, I had a 6-day work week, and the 7th day was training for 4 to 6 hours. So I didn't get a day off, because I thought maybe we had an 8-day work week in the military if they're making me work for 7 days, but no, it doesn't work like that. It starts back over and you're on day 1. It's horrible. But they make you train like crazy. Well, why do they do that? Why do certain positions have that built in where you have to do lots of training? Because it's a type of job where something unexpected is going to come at you. Something is going to pop in front of you that you don't have time to think about. And you just have to react. And there's a thing called muscle memory. When you train over and over and over again, the muscle memory kicks in. And hopefully it's good muscle memory. Because sometimes bad things can come out as muscle memory that you don't want to happen. But the point I'm trying to make is that it's kind of no different than when God shatters our expectations. When he shows up and he throws a curveball and everything in your life feels like it's being turned upside down, he's letting you see you. Because everything within you is going to start to come out, whether it's good or bad. Right? There's no atheist in a foxhole. When you get put under pressure, your real self will start to come out. Has anybody ever been in a position like that, where maybe you got into a argument, or you got upset about something, and then afterwards you're like, what was that? Was that me? Why did I react that way? That's the same exact thing, where there's something in you to the core that is who you are that you need to kind of adjust or fix or whatever that's coming out because of the pressure. And so when we don't have time to react, when God just shows up, he can really help us transform. That's why I believe this word is so powerful. Because that's exactly what happened with Esther, right? She had to just show up. She had to just react to what was happening. And who she was called to be as a woman of God with power started to show up. This courage and this boldness. Even in a day when, let's be honest, women were not respected back then. For her to have a story like this really makes a statement in that culture. This is huge. And we know that women are far superior over men. That's not the point of this message, right? But this courage and this boldness that she had to display in a moment of great pressure That was the core of who she was, but it was through her surrendering to that call that God put in her life, not thinking about it, not having a prepared speech, not having this, I'm going to do this in my life, but simply, okay, God, I don't know what you're doing, but I'm answering that call. I'm going to be faithful to what is showing up. And that's what God is wanting us to do for 2026. Sometimes all that needs to happen, and it can be as simple as this, depending on what God's going to shatter in your life as far as your expectations. But sometimes all we need to do is just loosen the grip that we have on our life, on the plans of our life. Just let go a little bit. Just let God have the wheel for a second, right? And you'll be surprised when you start to approach this topic in an objective way. Like you step back and like, okay, what am I really doing here? You should surprise yourself, if you've never done that before, how tightly of a grip you have on your life. And sometimes that's what God is wanting. That's how we get through transformation, is by letting go and giving it to God, surrendering to His plan, especially when He starts to do something that we were not expecting. Last time I checked, God still knows what He's doing. For any of you who are worried, if you didn't know that, I can confirm, He still knows what He's doing. Even when He moves us in a direction that we never expected. It's hard to wrap our head around when we're like, hey, wait a minute, what are you doing? Right? Like, He knows what He's doing. And then that can be hard, right? Put yourself in Esther's shoes. I'm sure she's probably scared, intimidated, like whatever the feeling she had in the moment, but she had to step up to the plate, and she did. She did, but it's because she trusted in what God had put her there to do. Some of you know that I do a little side hustle to make some extra money for my family. I work at a hospital in downtown San Antonio, and all they have us do is sit in the ER. I'm in uniform as a police officer, just to make sure nobody gets unruly, and obviously in the downtown area, there's quite the clientele who can walk in and get seen at a hospital. It can get very colorful and interesting at times, for sure. So I actually worked last night. I went in around 7 in the evening, and there was a super full moon, or super moon, a wolf moon, whatever they call it last night. I'm telling you, anyone who's in law enforcement, fire, medical, like the whole full moon thing is true. Like something spiritual happens because people start going crazy. The stupid come out. So, I mean, that's just the only way to say it. I mean, it is every single time there's been a full moon, this stuff happens. And last night was, how do I say it, extra? Was really extra. I'm probably going to be saying that right. Scott, help me out here. No, I'm just kidding. It was crazy busy last night. You could tell the full moon was fully mooning or whatever. I don't know, man. It was doing its thing. People were showing up in droves. There were tons of people going crazy. There were tons of people upset. Even the nursing staff and the doctors were being feisty. And I'm like, ooh, what am I walking into here? Dang, chill out. I mean, it had been a day. Like every person that I normally work with, they come up to me and was like, oh man, you have no idea. You haven't been here all day. This, and this happened. Like everybody was doing that. I'm like, okay, it's been a day. I get it. So what happens very frequently is people will come in who are either having mental health issues or are on drugs, which are causing mental health issues. And those are usually the people that I have to deal with, right? Every once in a while I'll get, like a patient's visitor that is being rude, or the patient themselves that's being really rude. But a lot of times we're there for the ones that are mental health related or on drugs, because they can get very interesting. And so I got called into the ER, and they let me know about this lady who had come in, and she looked like she was maybe in her, I don't know, late 30s, mid 40s, but you could totally tell she was a drug addict, so she could have been younger than that, because meth really messes with your physical appearance. And it ages you. Anyways, so they just let me know that, she's known to get aggressive, and she spits on people, and, she's here under an emergency detention, and we just want you to kind of be in the area so she can see the monkey suit and hopefully not go crazy. So we're standing there, and they put her in a room, and sure enough, man, she starts going crazy. She was going nuts, screaming at the top of her lungs, and they have staff that will sit there for, they have like a section where they'll put anyone who has mental health or suicidal ideations, and they have a staff member who just watches them. They're just there as a sitter to make sure nothing happens. And no matter who they put there, as soon as that lady caught the eyes of that person, I mean, she just would blow up. You know, and she'd calm down if we kind of blocked the view and she wasn't looking at the person. As soon as she caught eyes of that person, man, she would just blow up. So, long story short, when they get really aggressive and they get very unruly, and it gets to the point where, you know, we cannot do anything about it anymore. We've tried everything, everybody's tried to talk to her. A lot of times the doctor will then prescribe some sort of medication to kind of chill out a little bit. With this one, I don't know if the doctor was busy eating lunch or something. I don't know what was going on, but it took forever. And so it was a really long time that I was standing there. Several hours I was standing there as this lady was really losing it, screaming and banging on the windows, throwing all the stuff in her room. I mean, just going crazy. And there were several times where she was swinging at some of the security guards that they have at the hospital, some of the staff. So at that point, the security officers are authorized to kind of grab her and put her in her bed and tell her to chill out, and then they back off, and it's like, okay. And this happened over and over and over again. And then they medicate her, and the interesting part too is I have never seen medication kick in that fast. They were able to give it to her through an IV, and so I mean within 3 seconds, she's like, I was like, whoa. Usually it takes like 20 minutes. We just gotta like, okay, we're almost there. It was really quick. So maybe about an hour after she went night-night, they called me back in there because they wanted to do an ultrasound on her because they said she might be pregnant. And they just wanted me to stand by in case she woke up and all the crazy started coming out again. So they did that, and obviously I'm able to be in there because I'm a staff member of the hospital, and so I'm able to see that stuff, and I got to see the ultrasound of her baby. And I was heartbroken. I was absolutely heartbroken as I'm watching the heartbeat, as I'm sitting there just contemplating the life of this child. I was absolutely heartbroken. I'm sure the child was not in the womb just chilling, right? Thinking about the situation that they're about to be born into. And I don't mean any judgment at all towards this person, but it is what it is. It's not a very good situation for a child to be born into. And I just felt this really strong pull to pray for this child. And I'm always praying while I'm there, but man, this was so strong, and I just started interceding for this child and praying for this child. You know, like, this lady was clearly homeless, right? She probably hadn't been to a dentist in 40 years with drug use and everything else, right? Her feet were black from being walking around without footwear, you know, like all these lesions, and just clearly did not take care of herself. And she's carrying a child, not to mention how she was, you know, on drugs, freaking out. She's clearly a drug addict. You know, like the risk, just in those couple hours that I was interacting with her to the baby, the risk to the baby, it was crazy. And who knows what was happening when she's not in a hospital setting, that the risk that happened. But being born into such circumstances really is kind of horrible. The child really doesn't get to start with a good chance on life, as we know. You know, it really broke my heart. And so I was really just praying, like I said, just really praying, pressing in, and it was more not just praying to those circumstances and, you know, Lord, help this baby, but it was more about seeing the beauty of a new life and an opportunity for God to intervene in a mess that had been created in order to bring something different to this child, in order to bring this child out of this life that they're going to be born into. That's really what I felt power in my prayers, is to intercede for that child so that those prayers could be answered in our life. And I believe there's a lot of power in that. I'm sure that child did not expect to be born into that. Just hanging out in the womb, ready, fresh start, nothing going on, no expectations, right? They want to come out and they want to start their life. But I believe that God can do something in that person's life, in that child's life. And so I simply told that story because the Lord was showing me how it connects to this overall message that He has for us in 2026. That sometimes our expectations need to be shattered. Because that's the only thing that will loosen the grip that we have on our life. And maybe this child that I was talking about is going to be entering into the world in some not so great circumstances, but frankly that happens every day. Every day children are born into horrible circumstances, and yet God still comes through. God will still come through for every person. He has a heart's desire to see every single person come into His love, to be spared from perishing, every single person. And so I really truly believe that there's power in this word for 2026. I believe that this is a word that we should really grab hold of, that God will shatter our expectations. And yes, He may have something new, He may have a new revelation, He may have a new outpouring, He may have something encouraging that we can grab hold of as part of this life. But really, in my mind, this is encouraging. To be in a position where God shatters our expectations and thrusts us into a position that we never expected, or our life takes a turn in a way that we never expected. Because that's the only way that transformation can happen. That's the only way that we can step into that calling that He has over our life, just like He did for Esther. It took the shattering of her expectations for her to see exactly what she was called to. And so I would just encourage everyone this morning, including myself, to do an inventory of our hearts and make sure that we're ready. We're ready for the unexpected this year, and that we're ready to be bold and courageous no matter what God calls us to. I hope that at least a couple of you are really grabbing hold of this, and that this is really speaking to you this morning. Because I'm sure some of you have noticed God is up to something in your life. I'm sure at least a couple people just in this small but mighty congregation have noticed, God, what are you up to? What are you doing in my life? Where are you taking me? And He is either in the process or about to shatter your expectations in order for that transformation to happen, in order for His supernatural love and power to be thrust into your life and projected through you for the world to see. And you need to embrace that path. You need to embrace whatever it is that God is going to do this year. Wherever He's going to take you. Mark my words, there's going to be something that's going to happen in your life where you're going to notice, whoa, what's going on here? That's the moment where you surrender to it and you embrace whatever God is calling you to do, wherever He's calling you to go. And that doesn't necessarily mean we have to go somewhere. It could be a path that He's calling us to for our life. God is always going to ask each one of us to surrender to Him in order for the significant to be revealed. The only way for the significant of our life to be revealed is if we first surrender to Him. And so He'll put us in that path. He'll shatter our expectations. And now that gives us the opportunity to surrender to Him in order for Him to start moving in our life, to take us to that place that He has called us to. He has called every person to shine bright for Him in this world, to be the salt. And the only way that that can happen is if we surrender and loosen our grip and give Him what He needs in order to make that happen. When God shatters your expectations, it is always for a purpose far greater than you could have ever imagined. I don't usually say this, but I would encourage everyone here to go back to this message and listen to it. I'm posting them on YouTube. I'm not about that. If you listen to whoever you want, I don't really care if you come back and listen to my messages. I'm just being faithful to God. But this one will be important for all of us, including myself. Like I said, I'm going to be printing a condensed version and reading it over and over again so that it can permeate into my spirit and permeate into my soul. The core of who I am that was shaken when the New Year transition happened. And God started pulling me in His direction and getting my attention. I have to be ready for anything. I have to be ready to surrender for wherever God is going to take me this year. And I truly believe there are going to be some things for some people that they never expected would happen. And they're going to need to have some boldness and courage. So I hope that this message will help prepare you for that. For that moment, hopefully you'll remember when you start to notice that thing happening where God is moving in your life, that you grab hold of Him and you show courage and you show boldness. So that's it. That's all I've got this morning. I pray that every single one of you have a beautiful 2026. I pray that the year would be blessed for you and your families. And I can't wait to hear the testimony of those expectations being shattered in your life in a good way. Where God starts to move you in a direction you never thought He was going to move you. I'll put you right up here so you can tell all of us whether you like it or not. No, I'm just kidding. Love you guys. God bless.